Danielle Smith with the Alberta Enterprise Group, collaborating with Common Sense Edmonton on interviewing candidates for the upcoming municipal race for Edmonton City Council. And joining me now is the candidate running in the former Ward 11, Tom Shaw. Tom, thanks so much for being with me.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me the name of the new ward that you're running for.
The new ward is named Ward Karhiio.
And do you know what that means?
A tall, beautiful forest. It's derived from the Mohawk language.
Are there tall, beautiful forests in your ward?
Millwoods was developed on this kind of land, and yeah, everywhere you go, it's just gorgeous around here. So
wonderful. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your experience that you think would make you a good council member?
Well, you know what? It's funny. I've never aspired to this sort of role before, but it almost seems like my past history has kind of built me up for this type of position. I've been in the ward for over 40 years now. I live in a home that used to be my in-laws' home. We bought that, and we're raising our kids in the exact same neighborhood I grew up in. So same type of atmosphere of kids walking to school together with their friends, bikes on lawns, all those sorts of things. So it's fantastic in that regard. So been here over 40 years. And then I have a bit of a background in land development. I went to NAIT, took urban and regional planning there. So excelled in that type of atmosphere. And then moved on from there. And surprisingly enough, one of my first careers was with Shaw Cable. So worked there dedicated myself about 5 years there with them. Moved all the way from planning out their infrastructure up to being their planning and construction supervisor. So really learned about the industry, construction, operations, building teams, things like that. And then moved along from there, did a couple private endeavors, got into a little more private industry within the development industry itself. And then that moved into me becoming a project manager with Alberta Health Services. So, managing projects like installing MRIs or building out 80,000 square foot mental health facility, those kind of things. So a lot of great experience. And I revert to the mental health projects quite a bit because of the experience it's given me with the types of programs that are provided. So for the homeless type situations, social services, those types of atmospheres. So it's been great experience with them. I've been with them for 15 years now. I'm one of those guys who has been fortunate enough to find the things I really like to do, and then I stick with it and I'm dedicated to it. So the experience has been just exceptional out of those guys, learning about the administration themselves, that type of bureaucracy, procurement, projects, business, the gauntlet. It's a great environment to be in. You get a lot of exposure to a lot of things that relate directly to city operations and whatnot.
Well, I will be asking you a little bit more about all of those issues, but why now? Why not stay in the private sector?
Well, now being with AHS, I've just built
why now? Yeah, why now run for public office? Why not just stay in the private world?
Well, you know what? There's also the aspect of me being a president of my Notwood Community League. A little bit of a story. About 5 years ago, I was asked to join them to help them build a community hall. So I thought, okay, yes, all right, I'll bite, get in there, start doing that. A year later, asked to be president, and then we should be having our groundbreaking on the hall in about a month and a half. So not just that community aspect, or not just building, but I'm also bringing folks together like Rod Leola, Christina Gray, Amarjeet Sohi, Mike Nickel, Tim Upal, all these sorts of folks. So I'm quite a collaborator, quite a relationship builder. So all these sorts of things have kind of built up to looking at this, and not so much looking at it, but just talking to friends, talking to the community, and then folks just saying, hey, why don't you do this? Why don't you go after that? Like, well, I like what I do. I'm, and I've got so much on my plate with work, with community league, with this, that, and the other. And then I was talking to my wife, Kim, about it. And she's like, well, you know what? If you do this and you're successful, you'll combine all that into one big ball, one big career. And you won't have to really do all the things you're already doing. So that's kind of how it fell. And then, of course, there's 30 people on my nomination list that
Hmm.
agreed with me doing that. And the rest is, well, here I am, right?
All right. Well, you must have had an opportunity to hear back from constituents through all the different hats that you've worn. Give me an idea of what the most important issues for your ward are.
Well, you know what? I had preconceived ideas to begin with because, living in the community for 40 some years, you know it, right? When you live it. So I had my notions already, but then starting to knock on the doors and talking to my friends, talking to the community that I'm already engaging, um, there's so much of an aspect of everybody loves the community. They're happy with the city, but there's the safe communities aspect. The petty crime stuff is
Hmm.
just driving people nuts, right? And value for our dollar. We're finding, I'm going down to Summerside and seeing these gorgeous homes. Grand Boulevard was this just a fantastic boulevard, median down the middle, tree-lined streets, really community-minded people. But now, without the maintenance, these things are just, it's becoming, uh, they're having to do the maintenance on these
Hmm.
things, which is unfair. You've got the weeds growing in the boulevard. It's not being maintained properly. So that's causing obviously huge frustration with pride in their community, right? And these people are very proud of their community. They have this grand boulevard that they moved into because of what it is. And these little things like not having appropriate maintenance done, not getting their snow removed well, traffic issues, things like that, is really starting to weigh on them.
Do you
So
think those deficiencies are because the city is not spending enough? Do you think they should be spending more, or do you think it's something else?
no, no, I don't think it's a financial issue. Well, I don't believe we need more taxation in. I believe we can do this all for zero taxes, maybe even tax decreases.
Hmm.
Tax decreases, at least on our businesses, but I'm sure we'll get into that conversation soon. But no, I think it has a lot to do with the way things are run, the efficiency of our administration. Surprisingly enough, I don't know if you're going to believe it or not, but AHS is a pretty lean environment when it comes to the administrative side. So I've maybe got 5 people before I'm up to CEO level. So
Hmm.
only 5 levels above me. Whereas I'm seeing and hearing from the city that they've got 12, things like that. So
Hmm.
just the efficiencies are just not there.
Let me
And,
talk
and
to you
what I,
about that actually, because I want to sort of get an idea from you about how you might change some of these things. Because there's a couple of things I'd point out with the city auditor's report. They found that there was an increase in the amount of middle management that seems to support what you've seen. 22% increase in supervisors, increase 19% since 2017. The overall amount of spending has been 36% above the rate of inflation and population growth. So give me some sense. Like that seems to be the trajectory that everything's on. How would you change that?
you know what, it's about getting to the heart of how these people are actually performing the tasks. Like for me, if there's 12 managers above me or whatever the number might be, that seems like a lot of inefficiencies in approving, say, building permits or approving projects expenditures or procurement aspects, things like that. There's so much inefficiency and there's so much time being taken to get to that next level of signature to move it up. And you know, truthfully, by the time I hit the 10th manager, do they even care about what they're looking at anymore? They're just signing that off and here you go. So I just find that uh, the middle management aspect may be the thing causing a lot of
Hmm.
inefficiencies in decision making, in spending. Um, and to be quite honest, with AHS, I make a decent wage, but I'm also I'm responsible for a lot of things. I've got a lot of projects on the go. It's not just one project, Tom, kind of thing. At one point in a few years ago, I had 17 projects in the works.
Hmm.
And this is equating to millions of dollars, right? So, um, if you're going to pay people a decent wage, then you would expect them to have a bit of stress, if you know what I mean, in their roles, and be efficient in their roles too.
Okay, let me talk to you a bit about that as well, because you might have an interesting take since you've been in the AHS environment on how you should be approaching negotiations for frontline workers. Because often what happens is the city will negotiate multi-year collective bargaining agreements, and then you end up getting hit with a surprise, like what we've just seen with the pandemic, and yet you have people moving up the pay scale because of seniority. It's very, very difficult to lay people off or to reduce their salaries. And yet we've seen in the private sector, there's been a lot of austerity. Would you approach collective bargaining differently in the period that we're in right now?
Well, I'm considered frontline as a project manager. And I haven't, none of us who are out of scope, I'm not unionized myself, none of us have seen a pay increase for about 8 years now. So we're the pawns in all of this, if you know what I mean, when it comes to working with the unions on their negotiations and whatnot. And I feel the worth is there. I feel that the negotiations are what they should be. The province isn't going to come in and say, yeah, we'll give you the world. That's not going to happen. And we all have great benefits there. We all seem to receive great wages. But I just feel that I think they're being done right. I don't think there's any need to attack a frontliner, unionized or not. And I think what we're doing is fair wages.
All right. What about the council member themselves? Because sometimes you get a little bit more credibility in negotiations if you're prepared to take a first cut. Do you think council members are paid fairly, or do you think that they should see a bit of austerity?
It's funny, for considering if we broke it down to an hourly wage for some of our counselors that I've seen, they'd probably be making $2 an hour. They'd be making less than minimum wage, because of some of the ones I've seen, they spend so much time in the community. They're so engaging. They're going to the events and whatnot. They're not just having a pancake breakfast one time a year that you all go to. They're coming to all your pancake breakfasts. They're coming to your events and things like that. So really, I never actually delved too far into what the benefits are and what I'm getting myself into if I am successful. But
okay, I'll ask you again later once you have a chance to have a look at it.
Ask me when I'm in and see how I feel about my hourly wage.
Yeah, I will. Let me ask you about what you think the role of the municipal government is. What do you think the core business is?
It's providing the services that we all deserve. It's ensuring that we're doing it in an efficient manner and bringing the pride back to this city itself.
Is there anything that the city's doing that they shouldn't be doing?
That's a loaded question. That's a pretty lengthy one. I'm having a lot of issues with the decisions of where the concentrations are. Wanting to be a representative of this ward, I feel that we're not quite getting the attention when it comes to the maintenance, the expenditures as say the downtown core. I understand downtowns are the livelihood of a city, but if you lose all that pride in your neighborhoods, in your suburbs, you're going to start losing the people, and that's your in essence your tax base. And with the way the world is changing too, that's not everybody's going to be working downtown anymore. People are moving to the suburbs because of being able to do interviews like this, being able to work online, having the trust in your businesses now to allow you to be at home and work at home. So I just feel that there's always been such a concentration on some of these areas that we're losing ours, and those are the kind of things I want to change. I want to bring the representation back to the folks in my ward. I want to bring that voice back.
Okay, let me ask you, because you've already mentioned taxes, and you said in particular business taxes. First, let's deal with it in two parts. Do you think that the amount of residential taxes being paid is the right amount, or do you think that there should be a freeze on that? There was a freeze for the first time since 1997, or do you think that there's some tolerance to have those go up a bit?
I think I want to look at it, see what we can do efficiently within the city core, within the administration, and what we're doing,
Yeah.
um, and come up with the ideas. Bring the ideas that frontliners are coming up with to say, hey, this is going to save a lot if we just do these simple things. Maybe we got to slow down a bit on expanding the LRT throughout the entire
Hmm.
city. I'm not against the LRT by any means, but I do feel it may be going a little fast. The development around, like I remember back in the day when they first built the diagonal line through Commonwealth, things like that. The big promotion was high density living around the LRT. So they'd be, buying a lot, putting up these high rises, densifying around the LRT, which it should be, right? You still got single family homes like right across the street from Commonwealth Stadium, things like
Hmm.
that. So what has occurred there? So uh, for me, it's not so much these ideas of creating an LRT. It's in the implementation that I'm having trouble with. We have these grand ideas that, yeah, this will create all these folks around. Everybody's going to ride it and all these things. Yet we charge people too much to ride the LRT, so they're not going to ride it. We create where there's thoughts of districts in our city with tolls and taxing drivers and folks like that. Well, uh, all these way we're implementing these ideas is at the heart of what the trouble is behind it.
Okay, you put a couple of issues on the table. I just want to dig into a little bit more. So, first of all, with LRT saying maybe it should be slowed down, we've got the Valley Line West, Metro Line Northwest, Capital Line South. So, do you support these going ahead, or do you think there should be a different way to deliver on the transportation needs, or do you think it's just slowing it down?
I don't get the reports and the knowledge from the
Hmm.
administration to be able to comment on what the numbers are going to be within the ridership and what's going to happen with development around, like what the predictions are for population development around the LRTs. So I'm at a bit of a disadvantage in that regard. But when I talk to folks at the door about our Valley line that came to Mill Woods, well, for us looking at it, um, I'd love to see my kids ride the LRT to go to Nate, to go to U of A, things like that. But for them, it's about a half an hour walk to get to the
Hmm.
LRT because there's no park and ride. So there's that implementation side. Everybody would think a park and ride would be perfect for that. And the ridership would probably skyrocket, to be quite honest. But there isn't any of those aspects.
Hmm.
The bus transit system isn't all that conducive to getting people to where they need to be to that LRT in an efficient manner.
Hmm.
So it's discouraging people, I think. And
No.
you know what? To tell you the truth, if I'm spending $3.50 to go downtown and then another $3.50 to come back, that's $7 right there. Well, I can drive my truck downtown for pretty much that cost, have the convenience of it all, be inside. Um, Listening to my favorite radio station, Spotify, whatever it is, um, and and doing it that way. So
Yeah.
where's the incentive, I guess?
All good points. And the Valley Line in particular has suffered delays, as you know. Give me your sense of what's caused those, and if you have any experience that you've had from project management about how you might reform the process so that projects come in on time and on budget.
The budget thing is very confusing to me in this city because there's been quite a few projects. I look at that the city of Edmonton police station. I think they budgeted that thing at like 36 million, and it came in at 109. The, there's an issue with the planning process. I think there's an issue with the way stakeholders are being engaged for these types of projects. I wonder if they're walking into these situations with a preconceived notion, going
Hmm.
ahead with it, and then hitting these barriers. I know for one, project management is not an exact science by any means. I may be one of those different ones where it's not so much about time and cost for me, although those are very large drivers. With AHS, budget is here's your budget. That's what you got. that's what you get. Go with it. Whereas here it seems as the money, maybe it's not budgeted appropriately at the start. I think there's a lot of stakeholder engagement issues, and I think there's it comes down to planning at the very beginning. That stakeholder engagement at the beginning to understand what the final result should be, what it needs to be, and the planning itself. I advocated just recently for some trees that were taken down because of a new bike path. You're telling me that nobody knew about this at the start? And these were protected trees too. This isn't some little tree that was just, okay, we got to put a path here, let's plant 5 more. No, these are 30, 40-year-old trees that were protected by the city, getting lopped down because of a path. You're telling me you didn't know that path needed to go through these portions before? So those are the things that are bugging me. I think it comes down to the engagement and the planning.
All right.
Our issue.
The other thing you'd mentioned is the potential for taxes to be levied between different districts. I'm wondering, because sometimes the issue of new taxation power comes up for the city, and there are other municipalities that have local taxation powers that go beyond property taxes. Do you support new tax powers?
Not really, not if I'm able to help the administration in those efficiencies and bring our expenditures down. If we can do that, what are we worried about new taxes for? Why are we worried about raising prices for ETS for the ridership that can't afford it to begin with? So I don't think there's a need for new taxes if you're an efficient organization to begin with.
All right. And if you find those efficiencies, I think I got the impression that you think the priority is reducing taxes on business. What are you hearing from businesses? Why would you think that is important to have a look at?
Well, it's an invitation to come and grow your own business in our city if it's cost effective, right? If you can go over to any of our other municipalities around here, Leduc, Sherwood Park, St. Albert, and plant your roots there, and you're spending half the money on taxes, well, why wouldn't you do that? It makes perfect financial sense, right? So that's a major driver for a lot of these guys. Another major driver for them is simple things like, if I want to spend $24 million expanding my business, building a new business to hire 120 new people, why are you taking 6 months for giving me a building permit? Why are these inefficiencies happening? I have this chunk of money that I want to spend right now. I, as a business owner, would not want to wait and sit on my money and wait for my loan to, gather interest and all, or paying banks interest on a loan that I can't spend because I'm being hogtied by a city. It makes no sense to me. So,
what would you do? What would you do about that permit issue? Do you think that there's some way of speeding that up?
Again, it's looking at that administration, making sure the right people are doing the right things. There's a lot of frontline folks there that have been there for a while. They have the knowledge of, bylaws, of codes, of everything that can be done in the field. These are the inspectors. They're the ones looking at it in the field and passing things. Why aren't they kind of working with those frontline guys, or the applicant, or the applicantees, whatever you want to call it? Why aren't they working together more collaboratively to say, hey, maybe we don't need to go this far for this particular project? And I think that's one of the challenges we have, is the blanket type policies in this city versus thinking of that neighborhood, thinking of that single project, thinking of it all in innovative ways of how can we make this more efficient? How can we get this building up in weeks versus having them wait for months?
Do you think that that's going to be sufficient, addressing the issue of the level of taxes, addressing the issue of permits? Because some municipalities look at the idea of giving direct grants or subsidies to attract business. Do you support that type of approach?
I love that approach. You want to talk about, say, environmental issues. Why aren't we maybe not subsidizing, but maybe excessively low interest loans for people who want to, say a whole community wants to put up solar panels? Why wouldn't you help those folks out and give them the ability to get it all now? And through property taxes, you build them back. All those types of loans. We have the power to be able to do something like that.
Hmm.
If we want to encourage innovation, we want to encourage development, we want to encourage beautification. Why wouldn't we step up and help these folks with that?
Okay, you mentioned solar, so I have to ask you about a fairly controversial solar project that was proposed for the River Valley by EPCOR. It passed 7-6, but if you'd been on council, how would you have voted?
I would have looked at it in a way as to where are the other places we can do this.
Hmm.
We've got such a gorgeous river valley. Why does it have to be right there? Is it a matter of the distance of the cable line that's got to get back to the generators or something to that effect? I don't know the exact details on that, but to swath a bunch of trees down, change the ecosystem, cause all these issues for a solar farm, not the river valley. No, I highly doubt that was the ultimate, or it had to be that spot, if you know what I mean.
All right.
There's enough land around here to be able to pick it up somewhere else.
All right. Let me ask you about oil and gas because it has been a pretty big part of Edmonton's economy, the whole provincial economy, but Leduc is not that far away. Do you think that there are still good jobs to be had in the oil and gas sector in the future?
I have plenty of friends in the oil and gas sector, and they're not the ones, um, you know, that you see on TV with the chains around the big pipe and all these sorts of things. These guys are the testers. These guys are looking at environmental efficiencies. They're the leaders in the community, ensuring that there's the safety aspects around the whole industry itself. So I believe there's jobs there. If we can step back and let these guys do what they need to do, we're going to find that they're the ones that are going to create the efficiencies in it, the aspects of making it more environmentally friendly. So why wouldn't we put those engineers to work? Why wouldn't we put those frontliners again to work?
All right. How are you feeling about the Edmonton economy and the capital region economy? Are you feeling optimistic, or do you think there's still going to be several more years of belt tightening? Give me some idea of what you're seeing that either gives you optimism or pessimism.
It's so tough in this time, like with this pandemic. It's just who's ever dealt with this before, unless you go back to the I guess bubonic plague or the Spanish flu or whatever. But I don't know how those economies ran back then. But no, I see a decent enough future. I worry about, say, the downtown businesses, like the property owners. They've got to start changing the way they think, because if anything was proven by this pandemic, is that you can trust and find efficiencies in people working out of home. You can trust in your staff to be able to do that. So, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing people coming into the suburbs, like in Karhiio here, because you can have that community aspect. You can have the schools down the road. You can have the big lawn. You can have the yard. But you can work in that yard. You can do your business in those things. So I do fear that there may be some say lease issues with the bigger towers, but we're also seeing them starting to step up and change those parking lots to residential buildings with the commercial on the bottom and different aspects throughout the building. So I'd like to sit down with those types of folks and say, hey, what can we do to ensure that your buildings are still viable, the streets aren't going to be dead? What can we do with the nightlife? What can we do with all the activity down there?
Let me ask you, you obviously have a big heart for your community, and you've been in that community a long time. The new Edmonton City Plan focuses on urban development, promotes more density, transit, 15-minute communities, but then also restricts developing in the outskirts of the city. What do you think should be the balance there between building up and densifying versus building out?
Well, look at what I referred to again about the LRT at Commonwealth and the diagonal system. The whole idea was to increase density around that. Well, that hasn't happened. When was that LRT line built? Back in the 70s and whatnot. So It's again that implementation I was talking about. It's the ideas are great, but let's make sure we're implementing these ideas so that it's becoming a success. If you're going to cut off development in the south, well, what are you compensating with? Like, what are you bringing to the table? Are you going to attract somebody who wants a yard like myself? I've lived in Millwoods my entire life, and in the ward my entire life because of what I'm getting. I'm an avid gardener, so I want the big yard. I want the kids playing in the backyard. I want 3 different yards in my yard, an adult yard, with the fire pit and whatnot. I want a kids play yard. I want a big front yard. So all the kids are throwing their bikes on my lawn and hanging out, right? So there's got to be a balance for sure. But if you're going to promote that balance and you want to do these things, then do it. That's my biggest bane of my existence in seeing these types of things is not being implemented appropriately.
Well, then talk to me a bit about the 15-minute community concept, which is quite appealing. When you look across the neighborhoods that you'd be representing in your ward, are there particular amenities that are missing that you would be advocating for?
Well, the ward is kind of different in the fact that I look at the Millwood side where I've been growing up, where I raised my family now. We have that 15-minute type system already. We've got Edmonton South Common. We've got a hospital. We've got another mall. I can walk down the street with the kids to go get a Slurpee from a convenience store. Now you go down to the Summersides and the Orchards in the southern portion, Ellerslie, Charlesworth, all those sorts of places in the south. They have that great community aspect. They're building the developers are building, community type halls. They're building the nice lakes, the beaches, and even the community leagues down there are really building up that aspect. But when I drive around there or when I walk, I can't walk to that convenience store in 15 minutes. You don't quite have those aspects. The schools, they're hurting for schools. They need those types of things. So how are you going to promote a 15-minute type scenario when you haven't promoted it for years and years and years? Like, are you going to knock down a swath of homes to build, a nice gathering place of malls or placemaking? How are you creating that placemaking aspect in communities that are already too far gone in that aspect? So the Summersides and whatnot, they need to drive to get to places. Is that your 15 minutes district you're creating? So I have a little bit of trouble with that, but again, it's the implementation. It comes down to I say it so often that I hope I don't lose my voice.
Well, I guess I'm wondering, do you think it's impractical in some communities, or do you think it's worth striving for in all the communities?
It's worth striving for, definitely. It's worth looking at how to do it in, how to do it in a mature neighborhood, or even one that's a new neighborhood that hasn't had that aspect. It doesn't have the let's say a municipal reserve set up for a convenience store, those kind of things. So I think it'll be a very difficult sell.
Yeah, well, it's a fair point. And because you've managed projects, so thanks for your honesty on that. Let me ask you a bit about affordable housing. What is that? When I say affordable housing, what does that mean to you?
Well, a place for folks that are lower incomes to be able to live. Place with folks who are struggling with, say, mental health issues. The ones on AISH. Places for them to be in, a community for them to be a part of. That's what affordable housing is.
And how do you think the city's doing on that? Is there any proactive policies that need to change to address it? Or
I believe they're starting to look at it now. I think there's a lot more collaboration that has to happen with, say, an AHS or the provincial government itself to incentivize developers to say throw up a new building with 100 units in it, and maybe allocate some of that to some of the folks that may have a little trouble say, getting the mortgage or even affording rent, things like that. So I think there's ways to work with existing landlords to say, hey, can we work together to beautify the buildings you have, to create communities for some of these folks that may not be as fortunate as, say, myself, to live in a home that I do, in the community I do. But that doesn't mean they shouldn't have a place to stay and a community to build on. I
All
don't want to
right.
see somebody thrown in to the middle of say the orchards that's out in the outskirts of the city,
Mm.
and they're trying to get to services that are, say, downtown. That really doesn't make all that much sense. I know there's that NIMBY aspect of not my backyard. You don't want a mental health services type building there. But I don't believe it's so much about that. It's about access to those services. What, and if you've got an LRT without a parking ride and whatnot, how are you getting downtown to those services from, someplace where you got to take an hour bus ride just to get to the LRT, right?
Right. Fair point. Let me ask you about one other area. As the city is acting as its own developer of the Blatchford Lands on the site of the old Edmonton City Center Airport. Do you think the approach they're taking is the right one? Do you think it's a good idea for them to continue building it out that way as the developer?
Building it out. Is
Yeah.
it being built out?
Well, I heard that there was finally some optimism because some of the communities are now being established, but it's been slow.
No, you know what? From the side of the city, for that, the ideas of the development, where it was this big type of net zero type of atmosphere and whatnot. Great. Okay, let's mandate that area is this way, but let's bring the pros in who know what they're doing to develop it itself.
All right. Let's talk.
Under the guidance of the city, saying we want this to be a certain type of development. Okay, fine. Now bring the experts in.
All right.
They've
Fair.
been doing it for years. Why wouldn't we have them doing it now?
All right. So you don't think that they're making enough progress on it then, it sounds like? I just hear from different candidates, different things. That's what I'm kind of curious about your take on that.
I see quite a big field of nothingness there. So,
all right.
It's been around for quite some time. So maybe we didn't bring the incentive to those developers to say, hey, although we want this idea, what do you think? Maybe that engagement wasn't there. The planning was there, at the start of it, and there was excitement about it. But how many years ago was that?
Okay. Let me ask you about a few issues that have come up in the last year. First of all, I know that you'd mentioned safety and some petty crime is an issue in your neighborhood, but also we've in the last year heard of this movement that calls itself defund the police. So when you hear that, what does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, whoever marketed that way probably isn't in marketing anymore, because that was not a very good way to portray it. I do understand it. I understand that our EPS need to be, they need our help. They need the community's help. The social aspect of it needs to be increased, most definitely. But taking police off of the streets, I don't believe is the answer, considering the types of crimes we're dealing with currently. I believe the fine folks that are out in the vehicles can be doing more engagement by being present, and we can help them by increasing the types of community engagement services that they already have going. I think with the movement, there wasn't quite an understanding of what's happening in the background by the folks in EPS. They have community engagement teams. They have neighborhood empowerment teams. They have collaborations with AHS, with programs like Access 24/7 for folks that have mental health issues, challenges. There's so many of these types of programs going on in the background that I don't think are brought to the forefront enough. That's what I would like to promote, to help take that load off of the guys on the beat, the guys in the car. Recently, they took away what do you call them, school resource officers for that early intervention. What's happening there? Why would you eliminate such an important part of a program that EPS would run? I have a friend of mine. He used to be a resource officer just at the junior high that I went to, and it was some of his best work, he said. The funny thing is I talked to one of my wife's best friends. Her daughter goes to the school, and she said he was fantastic. He built relationships. He taught us the types of roads that you could go down by doing these, the petty crime, the vandalism, all those sorts of aspects. So I think even community leagues can step up by engaging their youth a little more, bringing them into, say, the community hall that I'm building. If I can bring some youth in to help in the build, to take that pride in that project, they're not going to be the ones vandalizing these buildings. Their friends aren't going to be the ones vandalizing these buildings, because they're going to be like, no, I was a part of that. You're not going to do any defacing. You're not going to, there's so many aspects that the community can help with. But I think that comes from promotion by EPS in the programs they're already using. For me, taking boots off the ground is not the answer. The answer is in promotion of what they're already doing.
Okay, let me ask a policing question from another perspective, because the residential speed limits were reduced to 40 kilometers per hour. Some were arguing they should go down to 30 kilometers per hour. What do you think?
It's funny. I was looking at that aspect, and the road right outside my place is it's kind of famously known as the racetrack. I think our Air One actually calibrates their heat sensors on people driving around that.
So are you a true residential road, or is it more like a commuter collector road?
It's a residential, so
okay.
It'll be the ones that will change to a 40.
Okay.
So I personally don't have the problem with the 40 in my neighborhood, because the one thing I think about is now that guy rocketing down at 80, well, he's going to get yanked, and he's actually going to get his car impounded. So I'm quite pleased with that sort of thing. But the funny thing is, though, subconsciously, I've driven around, and I actually drive 40 anyways in these neighborhoods, because mind you, ours, it's a little different because I have the kids in the neighborhood. I've got that mentality. But even when I go down to, say, the orchards, where the streets are a little narrower, I'm doing 40 there too, just because of my knowledge of safety and whatnot. And a lot of people are already driving these speeds. So is a simple white sign that says 40 kilometers an hour going to change that? I don't know. But again, coming back to that implementation, if you're going to make these zones 40, are you enforcing that? Are you going to start enforcing it? Is there a point in making it 40 if you're not going to have at least a bit of maybe photo radar? The community-friendly ones where the car comes out just to ensure that people are aware, the educational aspect. I'm not talking the cash cow ones down on the Anthony Henday or something like that, where I don't feel it's quite warranted. I would rather see it here and enforced. So,
all right.
Are we just throwing money at nothing because we feel that this is going to change it all? I have a hard time believing that.
Okay, let me ask you a question about how the private sector should interact with the city, because the Edmonton's garbage collection is already half private. There's often discussion about golf courses being operated privately. Do you think that private sector delivery of public services is the right way to go, or do you generally not support that type of approach?
I think it's a look at each aspect type thing. Garbage collection, I could see it keeping commercialized for, say, the major apartment buildings, things like that. In the residents, I have trouble believing it's going to be cost effective. If it is, I'd like to really see the numbers before I make a judgment call on that. I have always seen the garbage man, right? He's that good guy that you're always waving to and down the street, and he could be, your next door neighbor and things like that. So it would be a hard decision in those types of aspects. ETS, privatize that. I don't think so. And where does it end, right? Do you now privatize EPS? I don't think so. So it would be, for me, a case by case basis, but I don't doubt that it's warranted in some places. Maybe the golf courses, sure. Rec centers, maybe in the property management aspect, but the frontline type swim teachers, things like that, I have trouble believing that we'd want to privatize those sorts of things. But again, it's looking at it, it's weighing the benefits to what the community wants to see, and the economics behind it, right?
All right, we're closing in on the final questions, but I have a bit of a fun one for you. So I'm looking at a picture of the new think tank downtown public library. What do you love it or do you hate it?
Who's going to be listening to this?
All your constituents.
You know what? I've seen the inside and it is fantastic. I can't believe how neat it is. And I'm a huge architecture fan. I'm a huge arts fan. The exterior, though, I don't know if I need 5 more years to get the vision that was created and start. Is it going to grow on me by then? I don't know. Art is so subjective. Architecture is so subjective. So
basically, I'll ask you in 5 years. We'll see if it grows on you. Let me ask.
I guess when I'm going for my second term, you can ask.
I will. Let me ask you about the role of the elected member. Just in our final couple of questions here, because we're all going to have a municipal, or pardon me, a provincial referendum on the issue of equalization. Is going to be on the municipal ballot, but no municipal referendum questions in Edmonton, although there are some municipalities that are. What do you think of the approach of a direct vote? Do you think that having people make the decision directly is the kind of thing you would support, or as an elected representative, do you think you should make all the decisions yourself?
I don't know. It's not a decision by myself. I don't know if we need referendums. You're voting for an individual to represent you and your community, your neighbors, everyone within the ward. For me, I'm such a relationship builder and an engager that my decisions are all based on what my community wants to begin with. So what do I need a referendum for if I'm representing your voice anyways?
All right. So on that last point that you just raised, from time to time, you'll have the city administration propose a decision that they think will be in the best interest of the city as a whole, but your constituents may want you to vote the other way. What would you do in those circumstances?
Well, for me, having the background I have in so many different aspects, it's a decision on the validity of it to begin with. But I'm also a very collaborative individual. So if it's a citywide benefit or even just for another ward, I'm going to look at the aspects. I'm going to talk to my constituents too and say, hey, this is what's on the table. This is good for all of the city, not just us. It's good for all of the city. It's not hindering us, or maybe if it starts to hinder my community, well, these are the kinds of conversations I want to have with the folks who want a voice. Municipal politics isn't all that glamorous. I've been to doors where I talk to people. One of the first questions I ask is, are you interested in city politics? Well, no. Do you vote? Well, yes, I do. So how much of a voice do people want is the big question. But again, I'm a big collaborator, big engager. So it's all representative anyway. So we'll see how it goes.
Thank you so much for the conversation today. I appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
All right.
And
that
you
is your
hard on me, so that was good. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate everybody who puts their name forward to public office. So thank you for that. That is your candidate, Tom Shaw, who is in Ward 11, Karhiio.